Some questions sound simple until they destroy everything. The courtroom had been silent for almost 10 seconds. Nobody moved. Nobody coughed. Nobody even looked away. A clear evidence bag rested on the judge's bench. Inside it was an ordinary black smartphone. No expensive design, no cracked screen. Nothing about it looked important. Yet every person inside that courtroom knew the trial had reached this moment because of that phone. The judge slowly turned toward the witness stand. His voice remained calm. "Mrs. Emily Carter, can you identify the phone in front of you?" Emily looked at the evidence bag. Her breathing became uneven. She recognized it immediately, not because it belonged to her, because 6 weeks earlier it had ended the life she believed she was living. She nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." The judge asked another question. "Would you tell the jury why this phone matters?" Emily stared at the device for several long seconds. Finally, she spoke. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "It wasn't the phone that ended my marriage." Another pause. "It was the phone that proved I never truly knew my husband." The courtroom fell completely silent. 6 weeks earlier, Emily Carter would have laughed if someone had suggested her marriage was built on secrets. She had spent 20 years with Daniel Carter. 20 years of birthdays, vacations, mortgage payments, school meetings, family holidays, ordinary arguments, ordinary apologies, ordinary love. Daniel wasn't perfect, neither was she. But perfection had never been their goal. Consistency was. Every morning, Daniel woke before sunrise. He made coffee. He read the news. He left exactly 15 minutes before traffic became unbearable. Every evening, he called if he was running late. Every anniversary, he bought flowers. Not because he was romantic, because he knew she loved fresh flowers in the kitchen. Their daughter, Lily, often joked that their parents had become predictable. Daniel always laughed. Predictable isn't boring, it's peaceful. Emily believed him. Looking back, that was the dangerous part. Nothing in their marriage felt extraordinary, and because nothing felt extraordinary, she stopped questioning the ordinary. Trust rarely disappears overnight. It quietly convinces people they no longer need to look closely. That Saturday morning looked exactly like hundreds before it. Soft jazz floated through the kitchen. Coffee filled the house with its familiar smell. Daniel stood beside the counter reading emails while breakfast cooked. Lily wandered downstairs carrying her phone. She looked at both parents and smiled. "You two are doing it again." Emily laughed. "Doing what?" "The same conversation." Daniel looked confused. "What conversation?" "The one you've had every Saturday since I was 12. Emily and Daniel looked at each other. Neither realized she was right. Their routines had become so familiar, they no longer noticed them. Daniel checked his watch. "I should leave." "Chicago?" Emily asked. He nodded. "One-night conference." She walked him to the front door. He kissed her forehead. "I'll call when I land." The front door closed. His car disappeared around the corner. Emily locked the door. She had absolutely no idea that would become the final morning she ever trusted her husband without hesitation. The house felt unusually quiet. Lily had left to meet friends. Emily decided to organize Daniel's home office. Her daughter needed a passport for an upcoming school exchange trip. Daniel usually kept important documents inside his desk. The top drawer held insurance papers, tax returns, mortgage records. No passport. The second drawer contained office supplies. Still nothing. Then she reached for the bottom drawer. It didn't open. Locked. Emily frowned, not because she suspected anything, simply because she couldn't remember that drawer ever being locked before. She searched the desktop. No key. Then a memory returned. Years earlier, Daniel had hidden a spare key inside an old toolbox in the garage. He had laughed while doing it. "If I ever lose the real one, I'll thank myself later." Emily smiled as she walked toward the garage. Some habits never changed. The old toolbox sat exactly where it always had. Dust covered the lid. She opened it. The tiny brass key was still taped underneath, exactly where Daniel had left it years before. She picked it up, unlocked the drawer. At first, everything looked completely ordinary. Old legal files, business cards, a broken wristwatch, several unopened envelopes. Nothing unusual. Then she noticed something tucked beneath a stack of folders. A black smartphone. Older model, no protective case, no charger, no label. It definitely wasn't the phone Daniel carried every day. Emily pressed the power button. The screen lit immediately. No passcode, no lock screen, just one unread message. The sender wasn't saved, only the phone number. Emily looked at the preview. "I still think about the last Tuesday. I wish things had ended differently." She read the message again. Something about it felt strange. It didn't sound romantic. It sounded unfinished, almost like two people talking about something neither wanted to remember. Curiosity overcame hesitation. She opened the conversation. Hundreds of messages appeared. Years of conversations, photographs, voice recordings, restaurant reservations, hotel confirmations. Emily didn't need to read every word. Within seconds, one terrible truth became impossible to ignore. Daniel Carter had been living another life. The room suddenly felt unfamiliar. Their wedding photograph still stood beside the computer. His favorite coffee mug still rested on the desk. Family pictures still filled every shelf. Nothing inside the room had changed. Everything inside Emily had. She slowly sat down, picked up her own phone, found Daniel's name. Her thumb hovered over the screen. She could wait. She could pretend she had never opened the drawer. She could convince herself there had to be another explanation. Instead, she pressed call. The phone rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Finally, Daniel answered. His voice sounded calm, comfortable, completely unaware that the world he had built for 20 years was collapsing hundreds of miles away. Emily closed her eyes. Her hands trembled. When she finally spoke, she asked only one question. "Daniel, who is she?" Silence. A silence so long that it answered the question before he ever spoke.
Daniel never answered. The silence lasted only a few seconds, but for Emily, it felt like the longest conversation of her life. Slowly, she lowered the phone and placed it beside the black smartphone. Outside the office window, the neighborhood looked exactly as it had an hour earlier. Children rode their bicycles, a dog barked somewhere down the street. A delivery truck stopped in front of the house across the road. Life had continued without asking permission. Inside the office, time had stopped. Emily looked at the black phone again. Just minutes earlier, it had been another forgotten object hidden inside a locked drawer. Now, it had become the most dangerous thing in the house. She took a deep breath and unlocked the screen again. This time, she forced herself to ignore the newest messages. If she wanted the truth, she needed to start where it started. The first conversation was almost 12 years old. Emily expected to find romance. Instead, she found something completely ordinary. "Thank you for staying after the meeting," Daniel replied only a few minutes later. "You would have done the same for me." Emily frowned. She kept reading. Another message appeared 2 days later. "Coffee next Tuesday?" Daniel answered. "Same place." That was all. No flirting, no promises, no secret language, nothing that looked like the beginning of an affair. For several minutes, the conversation sounded exactly like two co-workers who enjoyed each other's company. Looking back, Emily would realize that betrayal almost never begins with one terrible decision. It begins with ordinary moments that slowly stop being ordinary. She continued scrolling. Weeks became months. Coffee became lunch. Lunch became business trips. The changes were so gradual, they were almost invisible. Then one photograph appeared on the screen. Daniel stood outside a small art museum beside a woman Emily had never seen before. Neither of them touched the other. Neither looked guilty. They were simply smiling. Below the picture, one sentence had been saved. "At least this Tuesday ended differently." Emily stared at the words. Tuesday. Again. The same day mentioned in the unread message. The same day that seemed to appear over and over again. She whispered the question no one else was there to hear. What happened every Tuesday? She scrolled farther. And then, for the very first time, she saw the woman's face clearly. She wasn't what Emily had expected. There was nothing glamorous about her, no designer dress, no expensive jewelry, no carefully staged pose. She looked ordinary. Brown hair pulled loosely behind her shoulders, a light blue sweater, no makeup except a little mascara. The kind of face that disappeared into a crowd. Emily enlarged the photograph. The woman wasn't looking at the camera. She was looking at Daniel. Not with excitement, not with romance, with trust. That frightened Emily more than anything she had seen so far. She continued scrolling. Photograph after photograph appeared. Coffee shops, airport terminals, museum entrances, bookstores, rainy sidewalks. There were almost no hotel rooms, no beaches, no luxury vacations. Nothing looked like the secret life Emily had imagined. It looked ordinary, almost painfully ordinary. Then another detail caught Emily's attention. Every photograph had been taken on a Tuesday. Emily stopped scrolling. That couldn't be a coincidence. She opened the calendar inside the phone. Tuesday, Tuesday, Tuesday. Meeting, lunch, flight, museum, coffee. Every important memory had happened on the same day. Almost every other day of the week was empty. Emily leaned back in Daniel's chair. For 12 years, her husband had lived another life. Yet somehow he had confined that entire life to a single day each week. She couldn't decide whether that made the betrayal easier or even harder to understand. Her eyes drifted toward the wedding photograph beside the computer. Daniel's smile hadn't been fake. She knew that much. She had lived beside that smile for 2 decades, which meant only one thing. Somehow, he had been honest in 2 different lives. The thought made her stomach turn.
The phone vibrated suddenly. Emily jumped. For a brief second, her heart stopped. A notification appeared across the screen. Not a new message, a reminder. Tuesday, 3 p.m., Museum Cafe. Emily stared at the words. Today's date. Today's Tuesday. The reminder had never been deleted. The meeting had never been canceled. Emily slowly looked at the clock on Daniel's desk. 2:17 p.m. Less than an hour remained. Emily felt her pulse racing. She didn't know who the woman was. She didn't know why Daniel had hidden 12 years of his life, but she knew one thing. If someone was still expecting him, then someone was about to discover that Daniel wasn't coming. Emily picked up her car keys. She grabbed the black phone. Then she walked toward the front door. Without realizing it, she had stopped looking for the truth. Now, she was driving straight to it.
The drive to the museum felt longer than it really was. Emily couldn't remember a single traffic light she had stopped at. She couldn't remember the music playing on the radio. She couldn't even remember the streets she had driven through. Her mind replayed only one sentence. Tuesday, 3 o'clock, Museum Cafe. It was now 2:48. She pulled into the museum parking lot and switched off the engine. For a long moment, she simply sat there. People walked across the plaza carrying shopping bags. Parents pushed strollers. College students laughed as they climbed the museum steps. No one looked worried. No one looked guilty. Emily wondered how an ordinary Tuesday could carry so many different lives at the same time. She picked up the black phone. The reminder was still glowing on the screen. Museum Cafe, 3 p.m. She stepped out of the car. The afternoon air felt strangely cool. Every step toward the cafe made her question whether she really wanted the answers she had been chasing all day. Because once she met the woman, there would be no returning to the life she had lived that morning. Emily entered the cafe. It was smaller than she expected. Warm wooden tables, soft jazz playing through hidden speakers. The smell of fresh coffee filled the room. She chose a table near the window where she could see the entrance without attracting attention. 3 minutes passed, then 5. At exactly 3 o'clock, the cafe door opened. A woman stepped inside. Brown hair, light blue sweater beneath a beige trench coat. The same face Emily had stared at only minutes earlier on Daniel's phone. There was no doubt it was her. The woman paused just inside the entrance. She looked around the cafe, not nervously, hopefully, as though she expected someone to already be waiting. Then she smiled, a quiet, gentle smile. She walked toward a table near the back of the cafe. Before sitting down, she carefully placed a small bouquet of white lilies on the empty chair across from her. Emily's heart skipped a beat. Flowers. Daniel had always bought flowers. Every anniversary, every birthday, every apology. She had expected anger. She had expected betrayal. She had never expected flowers. Emily watched as the woman checked her watch. 3:03. Then she looked toward the entrance again, still smiling, still waiting, completely unaware that Daniel Carter would never walk through that door. Emily slowly stood. She took one deep breath. Then, for the first time in 20 years, she walked toward the woman who had quietly lived beside her marriage. Emily stopped beside the table. For a moment, she couldn't find her voice. The woman looked up. Her smile remained.
She glanced toward the cafe entrance one more time before speaking. "I'm sorry. I think someone else may have taken your table." Emily slowly shook her head. "No." Her voice was calm, almost too calm. "I came to see you." The woman looked confused. "I'm afraid we've never met." Emily nodded. "You're right." A long silence settled between them. Then Emily quietly said the words she had repeated in her mind during the entire drive. "My name is Emily Carter." The smile disappeared. Not gradually, instantly. The color drained from the woman's face. Her eyes widened. She looked toward the empty chair across from her, then back at Emily. For several seconds, she couldn't speak. Finally, she whispered, "No." Emily pulled out the chair opposite her and sat down. Neither woman looked away. Neither woman raised her voice. The silence between them carried more weight than an argument ever could. The woman lowered her eyes. "So, it finally happened." Emily frowned. "What happened?" The woman looked at the bouquet of white lilies resting on the empty chair. "I always wondered which Tuesday it would be." Emily felt her heart quicken. "You knew about me?" The woman nodded once. "I've always known about you." Emily's hands tightened beneath the table. "And yet, you stayed." The woman closed her eyes for a brief moment. "When people hear stories like ours, they always think it's simple. It never is." Emily almost laughed. Simple? There was nothing simple about finding 12 years hidden inside a locked drawer. She leaned forward. "I didn't come here for excuses. I came for the truth." The woman slowly reached into her handbag. Emily's body tensed. Instead of a phone, the woman removed a small sealed envelope. Emily immediately recognized the handwriting on the front. Daniel's handwriting. Across the envelope, only 4 words had been written. "For Emily, when you arrive." Emily stared at it. Her breathing stopped. "When?" she whispered. "Not if." The woman nodded. A tear finally escaped down her cheek. "He told me that one day you would find the phone." Emily looked up sharply. "What?" He said, "Secrets don't stay buried forever." He believed the truth always arrives when people are finally ready to survive it. The cafe suddenly felt smaller. The conversations around them disappeared. Emily looked from the envelope to the flowers, then back to the woman. One question echoed louder than all the others. If Daniel knew this day would come, then why didn't he tell me himself? The woman looked at the empty chair one last time. Her answer came so quietly, Emily almost didn't hear it. Because he never believed he'd run out of Tuesdays.
Emily couldn't move. The envelope rested between her hands. Its edges were slightly worn, not from age, but from being carried. Someone had protected it, waited for it, almost as if this moment had been rehearsed long before either woman walked into the cafe. She looked at the handwriting again. There was no doubt. Every letter, every curve, every space between the words. It belonged to Daniel. For 20 years, birthday cards, anniversary notes, Christmas presents. Emily would have recognized his handwriting anywhere. Her thumb slid beneath the seal, then stopped. She looked across the table. "You've had this all along?" The woman nodded. "For almost 6 months." Emily frowned. 6 months? "He gave it to me the last time we met." The words landed heavily. The last time. Emily hadn't even realized there had been a last time. She lowered her eyes back to the envelope. So, he knew. He knew something was coming? The woman didn't answer immediately. Instead, she quietly pushed the bouquet of white lilies a little closer to the empty chair. He wasn't afraid of the truth, she finally whispered. He was afraid of time. Emily looked up. What does that mean? I think. The woman paused. The letter should answer that better than I can. Emily carefully broke the seal. Inside, there was only one folded sheet of paper. No photographs. No legal documents. No explanations. Just one handwritten letter. She unfolded it slowly. For a few seconds, she simply stared at the first line. Her breathing became uneven. Because Daniel hadn't begun with an apology. He hadn't written, "I'm sorry." He hadn't written, "Please forgive me." Instead, the first sentence read, "Emily, if you're reading this, then I've already run out of Tuesdays." Emily closed her eyes. The cafe disappeared. The conversations around her faded. Even the music seemed to vanish. Only Daniel's words remained. And for the first time since finding the phone, she felt as though he was speaking directly to her again. Emily read the second line, then the third. Every word felt familiar. Not because she had seen it before, but because it sounded exactly like Daniel. Calm, measured, never wasting a sentence. Right now, you're probably wondering who betrayed you. Emily swallowed. If that's the only question you're asking, then I've already failed you. She stopped reading. Her eyes drifted toward the woman sitting across from her. Neither of them spoke. The cafe remained filled with quiet conversations. Coffee cups clinked against saucers. Someone laughed near the counter. The ordinary world continued, while Emily felt her own slipping away. She looked back at the letter. You deserve every reason to hate me. I accepted that long before you opened this envelope. A tear rolled silently down Emily's cheek. She wiped it away before anyone noticed. But before you decide who I became, please remember who I was. Emily closed her eyes. She remembered. The man who never forgot birthdays. The father who stayed awake through Lily's fevers. The husband who brought flowers home for no reason. Those memories had never felt false. That was the part she couldn't understand. She continued reading. There are things inside that phone I wanted you to find. And there are things you will never find, because I couldn't leave them behind. Emily frowned. She read the sentence again. What things? What had Daniel chosen to hide, even now? The letter continued. The woman sitting across from you is not the person who destroyed our marriage. Emily slowly looked up.
The woman lowered her eyes. She looked as though she had been carrying those words for years. Emily's heart pounded. Then who had? Her hands tightened around the letter. By the time you finish reading this, you'll believe you finally know the truth. You won't. You're only standing at the beginning of it. Emily felt a chill run through her body. Daniel wasn't explaining the past. He was preparing her for something still waiting ahead. She reached the final paragraph. The handwriting looked slightly weaker, less steady, as though each sentence had become harder to write. Don't ask why I loved two people. Ask why I believed losing both of you was the only way to protect you. Emily's breathing stopped. Protect them? From what? She looked at the woman. The woman was already crying. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, like someone who had been mourning long before anyone else knew there was a reason to grieve. Emily folded the letter slowly. For several moments, neither woman spoke. Finally, Emily asked the only question that mattered now. What did Daniel think he was protecting us from? The woman looked toward the museum windows. Her face had become pale. When she finally answered, her voice was barely above a whisper. He wasn't trying to protect you from a person. She paused. He was trying to protect both of you from the truth that put him in that courtroom.
Emily kept staring at the folded newspaper. She no longer cared about the headline, the courthouse photograph, the federal agents, even Daniel's handwritten note. For the first time since opening the hidden phone, one question had become louder than all the others. She slowly looked across the table. If Daniel wasn't trying to protect you, then why did he spend 12 years meeting you? The woman didn't answer immediately. Instead, she gently reached for one of the white lilies resting on the empty chair. She rolled the stem slowly between her fingers, almost as if remembering another Tuesday. Finally, she spoke. It didn't begin in a museum. Emily waited. It began in a courthouse. Emily frowned. 12 years ago, I walked into Daniel's office because I needed an attorney. The words landed quietly, yet they changed everything. I wasn't looking for friendship. I wasn't looking for love. I was terrified. Emily remained silent. The woman continued. My employer had asked me to sign documents I knew weren't true. I refused. They threatened to destroy my career. So I hired Daniel. Emily looked down at Daniel's letter again. Daniel had never mentioned the case, not once. He accepted it immediately. The woman smiled faintly. He said, "People don't come to lawyers because life is easy." Emily could almost hear Daniel saying it. It sounded exactly like him. So every Tuesday, Emily whispered, was a meeting? The woman nodded. At first. She looked toward the museum windows. Then the case became larger. The meetings became longer. And somewhere along the way, Daniel stopped being only my attorney. Emily's heart tightened. The woman noticed. She shook her head gently. No, not what you're thinking. Emily didn't reply. I became, the woman searched for the right words, someone he refused to abandon. Silence settled over the table. Outside, children crossed the museum plaza. A city bus pulled away from the curb. Life continued. Inside the cafe, time seemed to pause. Emily finally asked the question she had feared from the beginning. Did my husband love you? The woman closed her eyes. For several seconds, she didn't speak. When she finally looked up, there were tears in her eyes. Yes. Emily felt the answer like a knife. Before she could react, the woman quietly continued, but not the way you've spent the last 20 years imagining.
Emily stared at her, completely still. The woman took a slow breath. He loved me, the way good people sometimes love broken people. He carried responsibilities that were never supposed to become personal. He crossed lines, but not the ones you've been picturing. Emily looked down at Daniel's letter, then at the hidden phone resting beside it, then back at the woman. Nothing made sense anymore. Or perhaps, for the first time, it was finally beginning to. The woman folded her hands together. There was one Tuesday when everything changed. Emily's eyes met hers. What happened? The woman's expression slowly hardened. It wasn't what happened. She paused. It was what Daniel discovered.
The woman rested both hands around her untouched cup of coffee. For a long moment, she watched the steam rise into the quiet afternoon air. It was our 47th Tuesday. Emily listened without interrupting. By then, the lawsuit had been going on for almost a year. The company kept insisting every missing document was an accounting mistake. They blamed software, they blamed clerks, they blamed everyone except themselves. Emily frowned. And Daniel believed them? The woman slowly shook her head. No, he believed evidence. She looked down at the folded newspaper clipping. That's what made him such a good attorney. He never defended a story. He defended facts. A faint smile crossed Emily's face. That sounded exactly like Daniel. The woman continued. One Tuesday afternoon, we met in a conference room to review another shipment report. There wasn't supposed to be anything unusual, but Daniel noticed something. Emily leaned forward. What? A signature. Emily blinked. Just a signature? The woman nodded. Not the name, the date. Emily waited. The document had supposedly been signed on a Thursday. She paused. But the executive who signed it was giving sworn testimony in another state that entire day. Silence. He couldn't have signed it. Emily stared at her. So the document was forged? The woman nodded once. Daniel didn't celebrate. He became very quiet. He asked for every file the company had ever produced, and he spent 3 straight nights reading them. Emily remembered countless evenings when Daniel had claimed he was buried in paperwork. She had brought dinner into his office. She had kissed him goodnight. She had believed he was simply working too hard. The memories suddenly felt different. He found more? Emily asked. The woman looked out through the cafe windows. He found hundreds. Emily's breathing slowed. Hundreds of forged documents? The woman nodded. Hundreds of small lies. Each one looked harmless, but together, they told an entirely different story. Emily lowered her eyes to Daniel's letter. Every sentence suddenly carried a different weight. The woman spoke again. That night, Daniel told me something I'll never forget. She smiled sadly. He said, "The most dangerous lies are never the biggest ones." A quiet pause. They're the tiny lies that nobody thinks are worth questioning. Emily felt a chill. Those words sounded hauntingly familiar. Trust rarely disappears overnight. It quietly convinces people they no longer need to look closely. Daniel had lived by that belief, in his work, and somehow inside his own home. Emily looked back at the woman. So what did those forged documents prove? The woman didn't answer immediately. Instead, she opened her handbag one more time. This time, she removed a small USB flash drive. No label, no markings,
just a plain black drive. She placed it beside Daniel's folded letter, then quietly said, "Those documents didn't expose a financial crime." Emily looked at the drive. They exposed the reason Daniel knew someone would eventually try to stop him. The cafe fell silent around them. Emily stared at the flash drive. For the first time since opening the hidden phone, she realized she wasn't holding pieces of a broken marriage. She was holding pieces of an unfinished investigation.
Neither woman spoke. The museum cafe had grown quieter. The afternoon crowd had begun to disappear, leaving behind only the soft clatter of dishes and the distant murmur of conversations. The black USB drive rested beside Daniel's folded letter. Small, unmarked, ordinary. Emily stared at it. So this is what he was protecting. The woman nodded. No. She paused. This is what he wanted to survive. Emily picked up the drive. It felt impossibly light. How could something so small carry 12 years of lies? The woman reached into her handbag one final time. This time, she removed a slim silver laptop. She placed it gently on the table. "I've never opened it." Emily looked up. "You had it all this time?" "I promised Daniel." "What promise?" The woman's eyes filled with quiet sorrow. "He said there was only one person who deserved to hear his explanation." She slowly turned the laptop toward Emily. "And it wasn't me." Emily's fingers trembled as she inserted the USB drive. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a single folder appeared. Its name contained only one word: Emily. She clicked it. Inside, there was only one video file. No password, no encryption, just a recording. The timestamp showed it had been created 6 weeks before Daniel's trip to Chicago. Emily looked across the table. The woman quietly nodded. "Go ahead." Emily pressed play. The screen remained black for a second. Then Daniel appeared. He wasn't sitting in an office. He wasn't standing in a courtroom. He was sitting alone inside their human study. The same room where Emily had found the hidden phone. The same bookshelf. The same desk. The same wedding photograph behind him. Only now, it felt like a goodbye she had never recognized. Daniel looked directly into the camera. Not at a script. Not at notes. Straight into the lens. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then he smiled. The same gentle smile Emily had watched across countless breakfast tables. "Hi, Em." Emily stopped breathing. She instinctively reached toward the screen, as though she could somehow touch him. Daniel's smile slowly faded. "If you're watching this, then I wasn't able to come home and explain any of this myself." Emily felt tears gathering before he had even continued. "I know what you've already found. The phone, the Tuesdays, the photographs, the messages, and by now, you've probably met Sarah." Emily looked sharply at the woman. For the first time, she finally had a name. Sarah lowered her eyes. Daniel continued. "I also know what you're thinking. You believe I built another life." He paused, then quietly said, "The truth is harder.
I destroyed the life we had because I couldn't find a way to save it without doing so. Emily covered her mouth. Daniel leaned forward. There is something I need you to understand before you watch anything else. His expression became painfully serious. The worst thing I ever did wasn't falling in love. It wasn't lying. It wasn't keeping secrets. It wasn't even what you're about to learn. A long silence. Then Daniel looked directly into the camera. His voice never wavered. The worst thing I ever did was deciding that one day you would have to stand in court and tell the world the truth about me. The video froze. Emily stared at the screen. She hadn't paused it. The recording had ended. Neither woman moved. Neither woman spoke. The silence inside the cafe felt heavier than anything Daniel had confessed. Emily slowly looked toward Sarah. Her voice barely existed. He knew. Sarah nodded. He knew from the very beginning. Emily looked back at the frozen image of Daniel. For the first time, she understood something that terrified her more than every hidden message, every Tuesday, every secret. Daniel had never been trying to protect his reputation. He had been preparing her to destroy it.
The screen remained black for several long seconds. Emily thought the recording had ended. Then, Daniel appeared again. This time, he wasn't looking directly into the camera. His eyes were lowered, as if gathering the courage to say something he had spent years avoiding. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter, less certain. There's one thing I need to tell you before you hear anyone else's version of me. Emily leaned closer to the screen. I've spent 12 years convincing myself that I was protecting you. Daniel let out a slow breath. I don't know anymore if that's true. The words hung in the silence. I told myself that every lie bought me more time. Every Tuesday bought me another chance to fix everything. Every secret protected our family. He looked away. I believed that because it was easier than admitting the truth. Emily's eyes filled with tears. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment. The truth is that I kept choosing the investigation. A long pause. And every time I chose it over you. Emily lowered her head. 20 years of memories rushed through her mind. The missed dinners, the late nights, the business trips, the forgotten conversations. She had blamed his career. Now she understood there had always been something else. Daniel continued, I should have trusted you. I should have let you decide whether the risk was worth taking. I never gave you that choice. His voice cracked for the first time. And I'll regret that for whatever time I have left. Emily covered her mouth. She had waited all day to hear an explanation. Instead, she was hearing an apology. Daniel straightened in his chair. His expression became more composed. There are people who'll tell you I was an honest attorney. They'll be wrong. Emily frowned. Daniel continued, I broke the law. The words landed like stone. I copied files I wasn't authorized to copy. I entered systems I had no legal right to access. I kept evidence I should have turned over immediately. I lied about where some documents came from. Emily felt the room begin to spin. Daniel wasn't defending himself. He was indicting himself.
I did all of it knowingly. No one forced me. No one manipulated me. I made those decisions." He looked directly into the camera again. "And if the law judges me for them, the law will be right." Emily couldn't breathe. The man she had loved for 20 years had just confessed to crimes. But Daniel wasn't finished. His voice softened. "If you're still watching, then it means one thing." Emily stared at the screen. "You didn't stop searching when it became painful." A faint smile appeared on his face. "That's why I chose you. Not because you were my wife. Not because you loved me." He paused. "I chose you because you're the only person I know who would tell the truth even when it destroys the person you love." Emily's tears finally fell. Daniel looked into the camera one last time. His eyes carried exhaustion, regret, and something else. Peace. He smiled sadly, then quietly said, "I only have one favor left to ask." The screen faded slowly to black. Emily reached toward the laptop. "No," she whispered. "No, don't stop." The video ended. The cafe returned. Coffee cups, soft conversations, the distant sound of a spoon against porcelain. Everything ordinary. Everything changed. Emily stared at the blank screen for a long time. Finally, she looked toward Sarah. Her voice trembled. What was the favor? Sarah's eyes slowly filled with tears. "I don't know." Emily frowned. "He recorded everything in separate files." She gently turned the laptop back toward Emily. On the screen, beneath the video they had just watched, were 6 more recordings. Each one carried nothing more than a date, and each date was a Tuesday.
The courtroom remained silent. No one spoke. No one shifted in their seats. Morning sunlight filtered through the tall courtroom windows, casting long bands of light across the polished wooden floor. On the evidence table, inside a clear plastic evidence bag, rested the black smartphone. Ordinary, silent, unremarkable. 6 weeks earlier, Emily would have called it proof of betrayal. Now, she knew it was something entirely different. The judge adjusted his glasses. His calm voice echoed across the courtroom. "Mrs. Emily Carter, can you identify the phone in front of you?" Emily looked at it. Her breathing slowed. The hidden drawer. The spare tea. The unanswered Tuesdays. The museum. The lilies. Sarah. Daniel's letter. The USB drive. Every step had begun with that phone. She finally answered. "Yes, Your Honor." The judge nodded. "For the record, please explain why this phone is relevant to these proceedings." Emily remained quiet. Not because she didn't know the answer, because she finally knew all of it. She looked toward the jury, 12 strangers, waiting for the truth. "It wasn't the phone that destroyed my marriage." Her voice was steady. "It was the first piece of evidence my husband trusted me to find." A ripple moved through the courtroom. Pens stopped moving. The defense attorney slowly looked up. Emily continued. "When I found it, I believed it proved my husband had built another life." She paused. "I was wrong." Her eyes returned to the evidence bag. "My husband didn't hide that phone from me. He left it for me." The prosecutor stood. "Mrs. Carter,
What changed your understanding? Emily turned toward the prosecution table. A silver laptop rested there beside the evidence bag. Its screen was closed. My husband finally told me the truth. The prosecutor nodded once. Your Honor, the state requests permission to admit Exhibit 21. The bailiff carried the laptop to the witness monitor. The judge gave a quiet nod. Permission granted. The prosecutor looked toward the jury. What you're about to see was recorded by Daniel Carter 6 weeks before his trip to Chicago. No one in this courtroom has viewed this recording. Not the defense, not the state, not even the witness. Emily's heartbeat quickened. She looked instinctively towards Sarah. Sarah slowly shook her head. She had never seen it. The prosecutor inserted the USB drive. One folder appeared. Inside, 6 recordings. 5 had already been played during the investigation. Only one remained unopened. Its title contained only 2 words, Final Tuesday. The prosecutor hesitated, then pressed play. The screen faded in. Daniel appeared. He looked older than he had in the previous recordings, not in years, in weight. His eyes carried the exhaustion of someone who had already accepted the consequences of his choices. For several seconds, he simply looked into the camera. Then, he smiled, not with relief, with gratitude. Hello again. His voice was calm. If you're watching this, then Emily made it here. Emily felt her breath catch. Daniel wasn't speaking to the court. He wasn't speaking to the prosecutors. He wasn't speaking to history. He was speaking only to her. His eyes never left the camera. I hoped you'd never need this recording. A faint smile crossed his face, but hope has never been a very reliable legal strategy. A few people in the courtroom exchanged uncertain glances. Daniel's expression became serious. The next few minutes will probably change what you think of me. He lowered his eyes, then quietly added, They should. The courtroom disappeared into silence. Every eye remained fixed on the screen. Daniel slowly folded his hands together. For the first time, he looked less like an attorney and more like an ordinary man carrying the weight of impossible choices. I've already admitted the crimes I committed. I copied evidence. I concealed evidence. I lied. And every word of that confession is true. He paused. But there is one truth I couldn't leave for anyone else to explain. Daniel leaned forward. The law teaches us that evidence tells a story. He gave a faint smile. But evidence never tells the whole story. His eyes lifted toward the camera. The company wasn't stealing money. They were stealing lives. The courtroom became utterly still. For years, they knowingly approved safety reports they understood were false. They released products they knew could fail. They buried internal warnings. They paid experts to rewrite conclusions. They turned human lives into financial calculations. Emily felt her hands tighten around the edge of the witness stand. Daniel continued, The documents I copied weren't numbers. They were names, families, children, people who never knew someone had already decided what their lives were worth. His voice remained calm, but none of that excuses what I did. I broke the law. I chose to. And if justice demands I answer for those choices, then justice is right. A long silence followed. Then Daniel smiled sadly. There is one person who deserves an apology more than anyone else. His eyes softened. Emily, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for every dinner I missed, every lie I told, every Tuesday I disappeared, every time you made you doubt your own heart. I thought I was protecting you. I finally understood. I was asking you to carry a burden you never chose. Emily's tears fell freely. No one in the courtroom looked away. Daniel reached toward the camera, almost as if he wished he could reach through it. If you're standing in a courtroom, then you already know how my story ends, but yours doesn't. A faint breath escaped him. So I'm asking one final thing. When they ask you about me, tell them the truth. Don't save my reputation. Don't protect my name. Don't invent a better version of me. Tell them exactly who I was. He paused. A good man who made terrible decisions for reasons that don't erase those decisions. The words settled over the courtroom. Emily closed her eyes. It was exactly what Lily had asked, exactly what she had struggled to answer. Daniel looked into the camera one final time. If my daughter ever asks whether I loved her, tell her she was the reason I couldn't stop. His voice almost disappeared. And if she asks whether I was brave, Daniel slowly shook his head. No, I was afraid every single Tuesday. The recording ended. The screen faded to black. No one spoke. The prosecutor quietly stood. Your Honor, the state rests. The judge turned toward Emily. One final question remained. Mrs. Carter, did Daniel Carter knowingly violate the law? Emily looked toward the black phone, then the folded letter, then the silent laptop. Finally, she looked at the jury. Yes. The defense attorney lowered his head. The courtroom waited. Emily continued. He lied. He concealed evidence. He broke laws that every attorney is sworn to uphold. Another silence. But he also made certain that the truth would survive him. No one moved. Not the judge, not the jury, not even the reporters. Because for the first time, Daniel Carter was no longer being remembered as either a hero or a criminal. He was being remembered as a man. Complicated, flawed, selfless, self-destructive, human. 1 year later, Tuesday morning, the museum cafe opened exactly as it always had. The same jazz drifted softly through the room. The same sunlight spilled across the wooden floor. Emily walked inside carrying a bouquet of white lilies. She crossed the room without hesitation. She placed the flowers on the empty chair across the table. The chair where Daniel had never arrived. She ordered one coffee. She sat quietly. No tears, no anger, only peace. After a few moments, she stood. As she turned to leave, her phone vibrated. It wasn't a message. It was a calendar reminder, one that she had created herself. Every Tuesday, 3 simple words. Tell the truth. Emily smiled. She slipped the phone back into her pocket, then walked out into the morning light. The camera remained inside the cafe. On the table, The white lilies rested beside a single untouched cup of coffee. Outside, life continued, exactly as Daniel had hoped it would.